So the Lightning Network is a layer 2 network. That means it is a network that runs as an overlay above Bitcoin. And it's important to understand that just because it has a different name doesn't mean that this is something that is different from Bitcoin. It works differently from Bitcoin, but when you are using the Lightning Network, you are using Bitcoin. You are transacting in Bitcoin. And the Lightning Network is, in many ways, has the same security guarantees as Bitcoin, meaning that in order to transact on the Lightning Network, you do not necessarily need to trust anyone else. You can run a wallet in which you control the keys. You don't have to use a custodial system. And the Lightning Network is not, by default, a custodial system, although there are custodial systems within Lightning. That means somebody else controls your money. So the Lightning Network is an overlay network that runs on top of Bitcoin where you transact in Bitcoin. So what is the point of the Lightning Network? The point of the Lightning Network is speed and cost. That's the main focus. So the Lightning Network is fast. What do we mean by fast? It means that if you do a Lightning payment, and we call them payments rather than transactions to differentiate from what happens on the Bitcoin chain. On the Lightning Network, if you do a payment, it usually completes in less than 1 second. So if conditions are perfect, then in less than 1 second, the payment will complete. And this is not something that people who are familiar with Bitcoin are expecting. The speed of the Lightning Network, it's lightning fast, that's where the name comes from, is often a surprise. There's no waiting 10 minutes for confirmations in a block. And when you make a Lightning payment and it completes in 1 second, that's not just transmitting the payment, that's done. It's settled, confirmed, finalized within less than a second. Now, under certain conditions on the network, if there isn't quite enough capacity, if there isn't a clear route between your wallet and the recipient, then it might take a few seconds to work out, and sometimes the payments fail. So you might click, and instead of a payment succeeding in a second, it might take 5, 6, 7 seconds. But usually, if it hasn't happened in 10 seconds, it's not happening at all. You'll get an error message saying there is no route for your payment. So first feature of the Lightning Network is speed. Less than a second. And here's a funny story that illustrates this. If you go to some Bitcoin conferences, one of the things you might see at these Bitcoin conferences is various Lightning-enabled vending machines. And one of the classic ones is the Lightning-enabled beer tap. So this is basically a beer dispensing tap. So it's a keg with a beer tap. And that will dispense beer in return for a Lightning payment. And so the funny thing about this is when you have a system that takes less than a second for the payment to go through, the user interface and user experience design of your system has to be considering that aspect. And the first time I used the beer vending tap for Lightning, what I noticed and then watched happen again and again and again, and it was very, very funny, was that people were anticipating that there would be some slight delay. So they're fiddling with their phone, right? They're scanning the QR code and they're hitting send, but their cup is in their hand. They're not ready. And so they hit send and the machine goes bing and starts pouring beer. And they have to rush and stick the cup underneath and lose some of the beer to the floor because it kept dispensing before people were ready. And so literally from send to beer starts coming out of the tap, less than a second. And they had to keep reminding people, no, put your cup, put your glass under the tap before you hit send on your wallet, because it kept getting people surprised. So fast, that's one of the features. The second feature is cheap. So the Lightning Network has fees, but these fees are very different from the transaction fees you have on Bitcoin. Because we're not relying on a limited space blockchain, because the Lightning Network is payments routed through peers on a decentralized network, the fees are actually much, much lower. And when I say much, much lower, I mean 3 or 4 orders of magnitude lower. So let's say your average Bitcoin transaction, let's say the fee is 5,000 Satoshis. Nowadays, if you look at transaction fees, you're looking at about, say, 25 or 30 Satoshis per byte in order to get into a block. And you're looking, the average transaction is about 200 bytes. So if you do that multiplication, you're looking at 4,000 to 6,000 Satoshis in fee. Now, 4,000 to 6,000 Satoshis is $3 to $5 worth of transaction fee. So to make a transaction on Bitcoin, you're going to pay $3 to $5. If you're really lucky and it's a quiet day and there's not much happening, no chance of that right now because of the markets being on fire, you might get in for a fee under $2, but I wouldn't count on it. Now let's compare that to the Lightning Network. On average, a transaction will cost you anywhere from about 30 Satoshis to 150 Satoshis. So a Lightning payment will cost you a fraction of the cost. That's 50 times cheaper than the Bitcoin transaction. So you're looking at a transaction payment fee that is measured in US cents, and sometimes even less than a cent, less than a penny per payment. And that means that you can actually do micropayments. You can do a 10-cent payment on the Lightning Network, and it actually works. It makes sense because you're not spending all of your money on fees. So those are the two characteristics. Now on Lightning, because we're mostly dealing with smaller amounts, faster, cheaper payments, we usually denominate things in Satoshis, sats. Satoshis being the smallest unit in the Bitcoin blockchain. Everything is denominated in Satoshis in the code at a technical level. As the famous saying goes, on the Bitcoin blockchain, there is no Bitcoin. There's only Satoshis. So, but if you don't know the conversion, one Bitcoin is 100 million Satoshis. So a Satoshi is a very small unit. All right, so everything is denominated in Satoshis, but interestingly enough, the Lightning Network can do smaller units than Satoshis. And it does so by effectively rounding up if you want to settle a Lightning channel, because you can only transact Satoshis. You can't go smaller than Satoshis on the Bitcoin network, but you can on the Lightning Network, because essentially the Lightning Network, you're exchanging signed transactions between participants. You can actually go lower. And so on the Lightning Network, one thing you'll see that might appear surprising is you'll see a new unit called MSATs, or milli-Satoshi. So these are thousandths of a Satoshi. So you can do a 1,000th of a Satoshi payment if you want. Most wallets don't really show you that, because that payment would be so small in equivalent fiat value that you wouldn't see that, but you certainly can do that on the Lightning Network. And fees, the payment fees, are actually calculated in milli-Satoshis, not in Satoshis. So the Lightning Network works through a system called payment channels. And payment channels are essentially bilateral smart contracts between two participants. So a participant in the Lightning Network is called a peer. If you're running a Lightning wallet or a Lightning node, you are a peer in the Lightning Network, and you connect with payment channels to other nodes or peers in the Lightning Network. And essentially, you have a channel to another node. And if you want to send and receive payments, you have to send them through that channel. You may have 5, 6 channels, or maybe you only have 1 or 2 channels. And in order to send a payment across the Lightning Network, specifically your client, your node, your wallet, will need to construct a route. And the way it does so is by finding ways to connect from you to the final recipient. So when the Lightning Network is operating normally, all of the different clients, nodes, or peers, I'm using those terms interchangeably, all the different Lightning nodes are advertising all the channels they have. So they advertise channels such as, okay, I have a channel from Andreas to Bob. Bob has a channel from Bob to Charlie. Charlie has a channel from Charlie to Diana, et cetera, et cetera. So each node is advertising what channels it has, as well as what payment fee will charge someone to use that channel. Now, let's say I, Andreas, want to make a payment to Diana. Diana will send me an invoice or payment request, and I want to pay that on the Lightning Network. When I go to pay that, I will not have a direct channel to Diana. But I don't need to have a direct channel to Diana as long as there is a path that connects channels together that can get from me to Diana. And this is a bit like drawing a map or getting directions on Google Maps. And essentially, the software is solving a similar problem. If you want to go from Barcelona to Berlin, obviously it would be very easy if there was the Barcelona to Berlin highway that you basically started driving down until you reached Berlin, and you didn't have to turn or change paths at all, and there was a single connecting path. And of course, if there is a single directing path, then you just use that. But in real life, usually there isn't. And so what Google Maps has to do to find directions, or what the Lightning Network node has to do in order to send a payment from Andreas to Diana, is find a path that gets the two connected. And so it will look at this database of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of channels that have been advertised, and it knows what the destination is, and it knows what the sender is, and now it needs to assemble a path that connects the two. So we'll say, okay, well, we need to get to Diana. Who is Diana connected to? Diana is connected to these 5 other nodes. Am I connected to any of these other 5 nodes? No. What nodes are they connected to? And what nodes are they connected to? And working backwards all the way to the beginning, eventually my node is going to figure out that because I have a path from Andreas to Bob, that's one channel. That's the only channel I could use. And then my node also knows that Bob has a channel to Charlie, and Charlie has a channel to Diana. My node can figure out that, okay, Andreas to Bob to Charlie to Diana is a route, a path that can be used, and then it will construct the payment along that route and send that payment across the Lightning Network. Now, if all goes well, that takes a second. If sometimes the path is long or complicated, and it might take a bit longer to calculate that path. A Lightning path can be up to 20 channels long. And interestingly enough, because of a trick of encryption that is used, each participant in that path, so for example, in the Andreas, Bob, Charlie, Diana path, the participants in the middle, Bob and Charlie, have no idea what the total path is and where the payment is going. Bob will only know that they have been given a payment from Andreas and that they must send this payment on their channel to Charlie. But they don't know if Charlie is the end recipient or if Andreas is the original sender. Bob only knows that though it came in one channel and is going out the other channel. They only see one channel around them, their immediate neighbors. And so as far as Bob is concerned, Andreas might be the sender, or Andreas might just be one more in a long path. In fact, maybe another 10 other nodes might be before Andreas. And Bob doesn't know if Charlie is the final recipient or if maybe there's another 10 nodes after Charlie. And so this gives us a tremendous amount of privacy, which we don't have in the Bitcoin network, another interesting feature of the Lightning Network. So this is basically the fundamental working concept behind the Bitcoin Lightning Network. Lobster Messiah in the chat says, I always enjoyed the open bar tab that eventually gets settled as a decent explanation of the Lightning Network. And so that's another great way to describe it. I've used that description myself. And so if you think of each of the channels is set up as a transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain. You can think of that as almost like a bar tab, an open line of credit. So when I have a tab between me and Bob, a channel between me and Bob, it's like opening a bar tab where Bob is the bartender. And in a normal bar scenario, you open a bar tab, you basically go and say, I'm going to have one drink, but don't charge me yet. Here's my credit card, or, authorize $20 on this credit card, and I may have 2 or 3 drinks. And at the end of the night, we're going to settle this tab. In many cases, in many cases around the world, you'll even see scenarios where people keep bar tabs open for days, weeks, months, years even. And they settle periodically by making a partial payment and then keep the tab open the entire time. And you can do that in Lightning too. You can open a channel and you can do transactions back and forth along that channel. And you don't actually have to ever close that channel unless you want to. And as long as you have that channel, you can do transactions across it. What's interesting about the Lightning Network is that if you went to a bar run by Bob, and Andreas and Charlie were playing darts, and they placed a bet on the darts board, and so Andreas now owes Charlie some money because they lost the bet, right? So I lost the bet, and I owe Charlie $10. Rather than paying Charlie directly, that's opening a channel with Charlie, I can go to the bartender, Bob, and I say, hey, Bob, I know I have a $20 tab with you, and I know that Charlie also has a drinks tab with you, but since I now owe him some money, can you take $10 off my tab and add it to Charlie's tab? And in a nutshell, that's exactly how the payment channels are connected together. What Bob does says, well, okay, if I take $10 off Andreas's tab and I add $10 to Charlie's tab, my situation hasn't changed at all. Instead, they've effectively moved money to each other without actually moving money to each other, just by changing two bilateral agreements, one between Andreas and Bob the bartender, and one between Charlie and Bob the bartender. So that's effectively what we're doing on the Lightning Network. And it's a very effective mechanism, especially since in this particular case, everyone has a tab with everyone in terms of the channels, and you don't get to see if the person you're moving from one channel to another is the final recipient or the original sender. All right, so it's important to realize the Lightning Network was first launched as a test network in 2018. It was then launched as a full production network in 2019. I actually have one of the early day pictures where in the test network, there's about 100 nodes on the Lightning Network. Mine is one of them, and you can see a picture of the entire Lightning Network. You can't do that anymore because the Lightning Network is very, very big. And because there are a number of unadvertised channels, so that we can never see the full extent or size of the Lightning Network. We only see the part of it that is advertised. And even though it started in 2019, we have to realize that it is still an ongoing experiment. It is still an experimental network, and things can and do go wrong. In terms of the feel of the Lightning Network, to me, it feels very similar to how Bitcoin felt in 2012 and 2013. In fact, Bitcoin was fast and cheap. In those days, we would accept unconfirmed transactions because people didn't know how to do double spends effectively. And we would also get away with doing transactions with zero fees. So the Bitcoin network in those days was fast and cheap. Because not many people were using it. But in other ways, it's also similar to how Bitcoin was in 2012 or 2013, in that things were a bit raw. The user interfaces were not fully developed. There was a lot of new terminology that people didn't understand well. There was a kind of a vagueness about how it worked in the background. People were using it without understanding how it worked. And if you start using the Lightning Network today, you will get that same feel. You'll notice that the wallets and user interfaces are not as polished, although they've gotten a lot better in the last few years. The experience can sometimes be frustrating, where you try to make a payment and it doesn't go through, and you have no idea why it's not going through. Specifically, just before we did this webinar, in the last couple of days, I did notice that I had some technical problems in my shop, the Antonov shop, which has a Lightning payment node that accepts payments in Lightning. And for a completely unrelated reason, had nothing to do with Lightning, but in fact, the system it was running on had run out of disk space, and I had to do some cleaning up in order to get that running again. And then, of course, when I got it running, it had to spend a few hours syncing the chain because it had fallen behind. And so it took a bit of